Hello. So in this video, I'm going to give you a very basic introduction to how to use Microsoft Excel to create charts or graphs from sets of quantitative data. So that's data expressed as numerical values. Now, charts and graphs are very, very good ways of quickly and efficiently displaying data for a reader. It's a great technique in order to make your data set easily understandable. And there are much more sophisticated ways of doing this. There's much more in-depth ways of doing this, but I'm going to give you a basic crash course on what Microsoft Excel can do with fairly simple data sets, because this will allow you to create serviceable charts and graphs, particularly bar graphs and pie charts. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm pulling up 3 documents here. 2 of these are going to be Excel data sets, and the other is going to be a Microsoft Word document. So I can show you both how to create these visuals, but also how to transfer them into a Word document, which would be where you are more likely to compose an essay that you might use these visuals for. So first, I've got this set of data here. It doesn't actually mean anything. There's no actual set of respondents, no actual questions that I asked. This is just sets of, in this case, meaningless numerical data, but obviously you would want to use real meaningful data. But basically, I've imagined that I have 2 questions with a Likert scale. So that's, for those of you who don't know that term, basically that's a way of allowing respondents to give ranged opinions. So things like strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. That's a Likert scale. And you can convert those responses into numerical values, 1 through 5 or 5 through 1, depending on how you want to look at it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I've done here, essentially. I've imagined I've got 2 sets of questions, Likert values for each of them, and I've got 8 respondents. So what I've done in the top line, I've put my headings, and that's a good thing to do because Excel will at least sometimes assume that the top piece of information is the title for that variable. So you want to make sure that you are adequately labeling this so that Excel knows what to do with it. So then I'm going to go ahead and select these 2 columns, the respondent and the first Likert scale. So basically what I'm trying to create here is going to be a bar graph just telling me what these responses are. This is fairly simple and straightforward. I'm going to go to Insert, and then you've got this section roughly middle of the bar on Charts. And all that I'm going to do is select this one. It's called Insert Column or Bar Chart. And I'm going to take the most basic, straightforward one, which is this first one. And there we go. So this is now a graph of the Likert responses for question 1 from my different participants. There's a couple of things I can do here, or a couple of things I should probably do here. One is one is I should give every visual both a title and a figure number. So in this case, I'm going to put figure 1, and then at the end, I'm actually going to put Likert values. That's not a very descriptive title necessarily, but for my purposes, I don't care. For your purposes in actually creating meaningful graphs, you would probably want to have a better representation of what your data actually means. Then the next thing I want to do is go to this font option. So you're just going to right click on the text itself, open the font, because one of the things Excel does is it creates your text in this sort of dark gray format. So it's going to be more readable if you put it in black. And then you've got values along the side here. So this is the numerical value, and then you've got the respondents along this bottom axis. The text here is fairly small. So we're going to, again, go to font. And in addition to putting this in black, I'm going to put this in size 12 font, so it's more readable, and click OK. I'm going to do the same thing here, but you get the point. You can see how this works. So this is, we've now got more readable values. So that's great. Now, one thing that's kind of useful is that you can adjust what data gets included in your graph, and Excel will update it in real time. You can make those adjustments by using these little square boxes in the corners of the highlighted sections. So let's say I wanted to add the responses for Likert 2 here. All I have to do is grab that little box in the corner, drag this over, and there we go. Now we've got blue columns for the responses for Likert 1 and orange columns for the responses for Likert 2. So that's pretty easy and straightforward. I can do the same thing. I move different directions. So if I want to eliminate Gia and Frank, I can do that. Now, I want to take this graph, this bar graph, and put it into my Microsoft Word document where I'm going to be writing my report, where I explain what this data means. It's easy and straightforward. I can just select, I can right-click on the chart itself and then click Copy. And then if I go to my Microsoft Word document, I'm just going to paste it in there. Now, one thing I do want to do because this is basically being treated as an image, I want to right-click on it in Microsoft Word and go down and insert a caption. So in this case, I'm still gonna put figure 1, Likert values. That's a very simple, basic, and straightforward caption. You may end up doing more detailed information in your captions. You may explain things like where this data comes from, particularly if you did not gather it yourself through primary field research. You can also explain, like, if this is data, if this is a visual that has come from a source. Obviously, if you're creating it in Excel, it isn't. But if you are using a visual that you got from secondary research, you can cite this. You can also give us some information about where this data comes from, maybe what this data represents, how this data was calculated, whatever it is. I'm just going to put a very, very basic one so that you can see how this works, and then that's going to show up here. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you are creating charts and graphs like this and putting them into your own research, you should always be referring to this table or chart or graph in your text before we actually see it. So if I'm going to put this here, I should have a paragraph somewhere up here, previous page, or above this on the same page, whatever it is, that's going to tell me, here's what figure 1 shows us. This is the data, this is the information from figure 1. And I should identify it in my text as figure 1 so that readers know exactly what it is that they're looking at here. You should also be thinking about how your visuals are labeled. So what does this set of numbers mean? In this case, we just have the numbers, and that's not necessarily super, super useful. So it's probably good to add a label on here. And I'm blanking on how exactly you do that at the moment. So I'm blanking on how exactly you do that at the moment, but that is a very, very good thing to incorporate. I'm going to leave off with that. So it's good to label this chart. Oh yeah, you can also adjust the size of it if you want to. That's fine in and of itself for what it is. But that's basically what you want to be thinking about here. Now, this is a really good approach when you've got something like a set of individual respondents and their responses to questions, something like that, where it's presenting data in this way. Bar graphs are really, really good. Another thing that you may have, though, is something like this. You can set up your data in sort of the opposite way, where you have your sort of primary value as numeric, or in this case, again, this is a Likert scale, so this could be agree, disagree, neutral, whatever it is, converted to numbers. But then when you've got, say, the number of respondents that you're dealing with, if that's the factor that you're interested in, the variable that you're interested in, you can definitely do this as a bar graph as well. So in this case, we've got the number of I think it's sort of misunderstanding what I'm actually looking at there. So in this case, this is your correct bar graph. Your number of responses section here kind of has lost the alignment with the Likert values. But that's okay for the moment, because actually I don't want a bar graph of this. I'm going to delete that, because what I want with this set of things, because I'm interested primarily in the proportion of responses, the number of people who gave these different responses on the Likert scale, what I want to do is depict that visually as a bar graph, as a pie chart, because a pie chart is really, really good at showing proportions of things. So in that same area, this charts section, I'm going to select this option that says insert pie or donut chart, and I'm going to select the most basic one. And so what this has done has broken this down visually. And I'm going to actually select data labels on there. And you can put it in different ways. This, I think, is something worth sort of experimenting with in terms of how your pie chart actually looks. The reason to put the data labels in there is because while you do have this little key down here at the bottom, where it says, for instance, blue is, this sort of medium blue is number 1, orange is number 2, gray is number 3, et cetera, et cetera. Having that information also listed around or on the proportions of the pie chart itself is going to make this a lot more accessible for readers. So it's worth keeping in mind as a technique that's going to make this more accessible. And then again, the same thing basically works. You want to give this a figure number. You can copy paste this out into your Word document. You want to make sure you're discussing this, introducing it, explaining it, identifying it in your text, et cetera, et cetera. So all of those sort of standard things for best practices for incorporating visuals, those are all going to continue to apply. Pie chart, bar graph, even a table, because fundamentally this information, this Excel stuff, Excel works in tables. So this is essentially a table, and you can just take this information directly and incorporate it out into your Word document if you want to create a table. And then the thing you want to do with the table to make sure that everything is clear is make sure that your labels are effective and readable. Sorry. So again, that's a very, very basic explanation of how to create charts and graphs in Microsoft Excel. It's a very good skill set to have, particularly if you're someone in the social sciences or the hard sciences, where you're likely to have to work with groups of numerical data. These are very good ways of quickly, easily, and with fairly little fuss representing those values visually.